Okay, welcome to this class discussion. We are going to be talking about how to create effective PowerPoint presentations. This is the second unit of a series of two. A couple of weeks ago, we discussed introduction to PowerPoint, what PowerPoint is, where to find things, how to create a basic presentation, so on. Today, we're going to build on that learning with some slightly more advanced topics in PowerPoint. So specifically, we want to talk about slideshows, creating shapes, formatting, applying animation, controlling animation, and using some video and audio editing tools. What we want to do is when we start to create PowerPoint presentations, as we've discussed, we want to be able to create effective messaging, essentially. Why are we creating PowerPoints to begin with? We are creating PowerPoints because we want to communicate a message, either at school, at work, in an event, wherever you might be actually, doing this event or planning for this event. So we have to ask some key questions, and we have to consider a few things. Who's my audience? What's the purpose? What message do we need to convey? How do we need to convey the message, right? And what is the venue? Sometimes the venue is like this, like a WebEx call, or other times it could be a large auditorium. Sometimes it's even one-on-one with a client. So it really depends on the usage of your PowerPoint presentation. That'll determine how you design and how you use some of these features. So there are some key design principles, okay? Good design creates a relationship between you, the messenger, and your audience, right? So you've got the presenter and the audience, and we are creating a relationship. We are trying to use this to connect. It is very much a technology function of creating a PowerPoint, but on the other hand, it's also an artistic function, right? This is something you get better at over time with experience. Good design principles are media specific and venue specific. What background, colors, imaging, and text you use depends on your scenario, depends on your situation. For example, you will see my presentations are usually black on white or white on black. And that's because I project my presentations usually to a large class or an audience. And when you go on the projector, if you notice, if you remember in Beacon Hall, when we do the projector, things, when they're amplified, they get very dull, right? They fade. And so you want high level of contrast. Like on this slide, you see black on white looks great, right? It looks wonderful, even better than the title, which is blue. But I needed to use the title to differentiate the title from the rest of the text. Okay? Then I'm using some small fonts on the bottom of this slide. You will see copyright information. That means that I'm giving credit, but I don't need to make that really large because that's not the point of the slide, right? That would distract you. You almost missed the copyright footnote, right? And that's intended. I'm actually putting it there not because I want to hide it, but because I don't want to focus on it. I want to focus on these bullet points that I have. So a key principle in designing is figuring out what you're using things for, what are you using the slides for, and how are you conveying the message and your audience, and then you pick what's appropriate. Font, thickness, color, contrast creates contrast. Pictures, figures, they create a visual impression. Like here, I can show you the enrollment process of a college, such as, for example, HCC. And you can see it starts from application to proceeding to applying for financial aid, then there's advising, and then there's scheduling of classes. So I don't even have to use a lot of words. I can just use a picture. Um, there's tons of stuff in PowerPoint, and this is where you're going to have to play with this in your own lab time and on your own in homeworks, right? You can do different layouts that are standard. You can design your own layout, but you can also select a standard layout. Um, and what a layout does is it consistently it puts certain aspects of your presentation in a consistent placement on the slides. For example, a title. Title will always show up on the top, for example. So if you select the title only, you'll see that you'll have a slide layout template that puts the title on the top, right, in all your slides as default. So where and how you use these texts and shapes is the creative part of what you need to think about. This is what we call the creative process. And, you know, this is really practice. And there's a lot of other classes you can take to teach you aesthetics and design. Obviously, we don't cover that in this intro class, but there's a lot of videos and a lot of things that your textbook talks about around how to improve and how to use better design principles in creating your presentations. PowerPoint is all about pictures, right? And I would advise using less words on a PowerPoint and more figures and pictures and visuals of some sort. As they say, a picture tells 1,000 words, and that's very true. Really long and wordy slides make it very difficult. You can also use the shapes outline where you can, where it gives you all these different shapes that we use typically, like arrows and call outs and flowcharts. They all come standard. You don't have to draw them. You just go into this select picture mode option, and you get all of these common shapes. Each shape, when you add it or a picture, you will get these sizing handles and adjustment handles. So you can resize, change the format, change colors, select, do all kinds of stuff to the picture. So once you add these shapes, that's only the beginning. Then you can customize by creating and by changing the shape the way you think is best for your presentation needs. You can increase the size, you can change the color, you can change even the proportion. Maybe you want it thinner and taller or more spread out and so on. There's a beautiful example of a very festive or, colorful process flow, right? Flowchart. And flowcharts are the different shapes actually mean something. These look like random shapes, but they're not. Like a diamond typically means that in a flowchart, it's highlighting a decision point. For example, if you look on the bottom one, performance review, that means there's a performance review that's being suggested in this step. And if it's a positive performance review, the position gets filled. You can see it goes to the position filled on the right. But if it's a negative performance review, you go back to advertising for the job and start the interview process all over. So these things are telling us something, and they're communicating. These pictures and figures are communicating so many different things. It is just incredible. This is beautiful, You can format the shapes, like I said. You can select colors and so on, okay? What I was saying, as I was saying earlier, is these formatting options are available, and they're very similar to the formatting options that are available for images or for constructs that you add in Microsoft Word or even Excel. So many of you will find many of these features familiar as you delve into more advanced features of PowerPoint. So different things you can do. Again, I'm not going to drill this too much because we talked about this in Word and in other areas of the class. You can do a no fill on objects, solid fill, gradient fills, patterns, and so on. And you get a little graphics fill menu option when you go to the format option under the topmost menu. You can use an eyedropper to select areas of the picture and pick a fill color, and it'll just fill. When you touch the eyedropper, it'll just fill the object that you've touched with the color that you've selected or the pattern that you've selected. You can select colors by the color code. Sometimes in marketing departments and in companies, they give you an exact, or any other use case really, they'll give you an exact RGB color model, and it'll be a code from for red, green, and blue from 0 to 255 generally. And you would put the code in, and this way you don't have to guess the color they want you to use or your client wants to use. You can use the exact and match the exact color that's intended. And, you know, I know that sounds very specific, and why would you do that? Well, when you're working for larger corporations, you're working for bigger established organizations, they take colors and branding very seriously, so they have very specific requirements, and PowerPoint allows you to put those custom requirements in should you need to do that. You can format shapes. Look at this beautiful slide with a heart-shaped picture. You can create the heart using the object selector and then fill it with a picture, and you can have something that looks like very, very professional and very festive. And all of these features you can get into the formatting shapes area as well. I like using different weights. I will increase the size of my borders or my dashes or my arrows. So I use different colors and weights all the time. So this is very familiar to me. I use this on a day-to-day basis. And you will too if you start to create PowerPoints. And you will be using these in your assignments as well. Then you have some interesting applications of visualizations. You have what we call shape effects. And shape effects gives glows and shadows and bevels to the pictures that you add. And you can do that for pretty much any object. Just select the object, go into shape effects, menu option, and select and play around with the different shapes. Animation is exactly what it sounds. It is giving movement, giving motion, a sense of motion, giving life to your presentation. At any time in the presentation, you can have animated slide content. So you would go to the animation view, and you can have different features applied to the objects. For example, there's different categories of animation. There's animation on entrance, there's emphasis, there's exit, and then there's motion paths. Entrance controls how an object moves into or onto a display on a slide. Emphasis draws attention to an object already on the slide. So you might have a box or a text, and you might, at a certain point, when you hit the mouse or something like that, you might want to focus on that object and give it emphasis. Animation allows you to do that. Exit controls on how an object leaves or disappears from a slide. So when you're done with making the point with that object, you can use exit features for animation to give it a different feel. Maybe make it disappear, maybe make it roll off the slide, whatever you like. And motion paths control the movement of an object from one position to another along a predetermined path. Now, this is a lot to absorb on a slide. You cannot appreciate this, as I mentioned, on a slide. You actually have to go, create a slide, create some objects, and play around with the animation. That's the only way to really learn this, okay? So I encourage everybody who's listening to do that. So here's in that slide that we had with the heart picture, we can do animation. You go to the animation menu, which is smack in the middle on top, and you can go to the animation finder and do different animations. I like using zoom and swivel a lot, and that just means that that object swivels into place when I click the mouse key or whatever entrance criteria that I've set. Sometimes I use bounce as well. You don't want to use too much unless you're trying to create like some sort of video mechanism. You don't want to create too much animation because it can be very distracting from the message. So you have to use. When I was very inexperienced, I used to think animation is the coolest thing, and I used to load it all up until I realized when I went to a few presentations in larger groups, the focus became a lot on moving objects and flashy stuff, and my message that I was trying to convey was lost. So you have to be very careful on how you use animation in the real world. When you're creating real presentations, you don't want to overuse them, but certainly many times using them selectively really adds a level of quality, professionalism, and interest to your presentation. You can apply animations in multiple steps. Again, the next couple of slides, I'm just going to you have to try these, right? You have to really go in and try what you're doing. Here are some motion path examples where you can have one heart moving to the other side, and you can arch it, you can swivel it, and so on. You can add durations if you want the movement to be faster, sooner, or delayed. If you want the movement on click, you can see on the top there's an on click option. You can do, instead of on click, sometimes we do with previous, which means that it tags along with the last object that was displayed. Again, very, very sophisticated feature in PowerPoint. Highly unused. Many people don't even use animations, but I want you to know that it's there, and I want you to play around with it a little bit. There'll be a little bit of homework on it, but not much in this class. I just, we're not overdoing it here, just introducing that this exists. And then, of course, doing animation poorly really affects your presentations. You really have to get seasoned with this. You really have to know. Otherwise, your presentation could be a complete bust because you're too busy looking at, things are too busy moving. And sometimes when I add too much animation, it moves faster than I can keep up with it, and I get lost. I've had a couple of disastrous presentations like that. So, very powerful. Use it sparingly, use it wisely, and that's really the message. And of course, from a learning point of view, practice. Okay. Timing, duration, direction of animation is part of the controls that we just discussed. You can see you can also have effect options. Some of the effects give you different options. For instance, this one is a wipe, which means it comes from one side to the next. So you can select from the bottom. Do you want it to wipe from the left, or from the right, or from the top? Right. Obviously, these effect options won't make sense when you go to split. Right. Split won't work that way. Split will have other options. But for wipe, the options are from bottom, from left, from right, and from top. So this I use very often, a bulleted text animation, which means when I have bullets on the slide, like I do on this slide, I might want to have a presentation where I want each of these bullets to appear as I'm making the point, right? Right now you can see all of them, but I could have easily applied animation to this slide and show the first bullet like as one object, the second bullet as all paragraphs at once, third bullet by paragraphs, etc. I can show this every time I click can advance the bullets. This is probably the most used feature in animation for me. I don't use it often, but there are times when I'm making presentations to a larger group where that kind of effect adds a little bit of power or a little bit of conviction to my messaging, and I use that technique. And you can add, when you're doing bulleted text, you can add text as one object. You can have the whole thing show up once. You can have it show up all paragraphs at once, or you can have it show by paragraph, by word, or even by letter. It's really powerful. If you wanted one letter to show up incrementally after the next, after the next, after the next, slowly, you could do that. And that, you might want to do that someday, but most often than not, it's overkill. But it gives you the control to do that. Each animation, as you add it, it'll be shown on the animation pane. The animation pane is 2/3 on the way up from left to right. You can see it's highlighted here, called the animation pane. When you click on that, this pane opens up on the right, and it shows all the animations that you've added on this particular slide. And the duration, the time, it'll show you these bars, show you how much the delay or how long it's going to take relative to other animations that you've added. So there's a lot of stuff, a lot of power here, okay? And again, I encourage you to experiment with it. You can do transitions from how do you go from one slide to the next. There are so many different options there as well. Final thing that I want to talk to you about today in this chapter is adding additional media. Very powerful, right? Adding videos and using video tools. I once made a cooking video. Cooking video using animations and using a script in PowerPoint. So I developed 4 slides. I created a video of my recipe, and I inserted the video right in the PowerPoint with text and everything all surrounding it. And then I saved the entire file, the entire presentation as a video file, which you can do. You can create any of these types of videos from your animated presentations, right? MP4, Windows Media, movie file, and so on, depending on your use. MP4 is the most used one. It is, not highest quality, but it doesn't use as much bandwidth. Windows Media File uses a lot of storage, right? They're usually very heavy in terms of file size. And you can insert video from YouTube. Usually every YouTube, for example, has an embed video option when you go to it. You can do that. You can even search directly in YouTube right from PowerPoint. PowerPoint gives you search capability. So you can add YouTube videos, either, for whatever reason you might need to do that. And then you can embed that code right here automatically without doing any custom coding. So here's an example of a video that's added in a hexagon kind of object, right? And when you do that, it gives you, you can add this little bar, or it gives you the option to give the user controls of playing, pausing, increasing volume, moving back, moving forward, right? All packaged. So it's very easy to do. Very, very easy to do. Of course, you can highlight different areas of this slide. You can put in, like, it has master violin class as a text, and that's the power of it. So you're actually embedding the video in the PowerPoint itself. You have lots of options, right? Once you add a video, you can go to the playback option on top when you select the video object, and you can do so many different things here. You can edit where you want the video to start. Anyway, lots of stuff here you can do, okay? Just it's basically basic video editing built in right into PowerPoint. You can also edit the video. You can trim the video. Maybe you only want a certain portion of it. Maybe you want to play it at a higher speed. Whatever it might be, you can do that. And of course, you can do the same thing by adding audio files to your presentation, okay? And all of these types of files are supported in the current PowerPoint, more than plenty for everybody's appetite, okay, to add audio. So you can add video, you can add audio, you can record your own voice. Then, of course, you need a microphone for that. Usually the built-in microphone works fine, but if you want more professional grade, you might need to buy an external microphone. Voice narration takes precedent over any other sounds during playback. When you're recording, your voice will take precedence. PowerPoint records the amount of time it takes to narrate each slide. You can actually practice your presentation and see how long things take, and you can also pause and resume the recording process, much like I just did with the WebEx, you know, earlier when I got a phone call. I didn't want the phone call to be heard, so I paused, and then I continued, right? You can do the same thing when you're recording on PowerPoint, okay? And it was very powerful, right? Here's an example of Summerfield Music School that is, you know, putting their own school anthem or school song on in their presentation, right? You can of course edit the clip that you added, much like video. You can also you can add transitions and animation to this by only having it play when you hit click or something like that as you're doing the presentation. So a lot of very, very powerful features in this chapter that I've covered today. I want you to go ahead and practice this. I want you to go ahead and play around with it. In pretty much every slide that I showed you, you should go and try some of those things to make sure you know where it is. You can always play back my video here and experiment anything we've covered today at your own leisure. And of course, it'll help you doing the assignments. It'll help you become a better PowerPoint creator. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording and then take some questions.